Welcome to the Office Hours, Episode 7. My name is John Fia. I chair the History Department here at Messiah College and teach history. We are here with Sloan, our creative genius. Wave your hand there, Sloan. We're back. This is our first Office Hours for the new year. Our semester started a couple weeks ago, and we're just finally getting into the groove here. So we're looking forward to having some great videos for you, great Office Hours. Got some special interviews coming up as well down the road. So sit tight, keep watching. I have my founding fathers with me here today, back by popular demand. I can't believe how many of you are emailing and commenting about these founding fathers. I saw some of you at the American Historical Association conference in New Orleans, and you had watched the virtual office hours, and everybody had something to say about the founding fathers. Someone asked me yesterday where I bought them. I'm sure you can find them online, but I think my daughters found them at a library, or I'm sorry, an airport gift shop and bought them there. So we're back. The founders are back with me. And if you remember our last Office Hours, Episode 6, we were talking about some Christian resources for thinking about the study of the past. And what I suggested in that part 1 of that Christian resources series, this will be part 2, but in part 1 I suggested that the idea of the Imago Dei, or the idea that all of us are created in the image of God, and thus have inherent dignity and worth, can shape the way we think about the narratives and the stories that we tell about the past. Today, what we want to do here in part 2 of this Christian resources for the study of the past, and again, a lot of this stuff is going to be appearing in my forthcoming book, Why Study History? Reflecting on the importance of the past, should be out in September of 2013. I've actually seen the cover art for the book. I can't reveal it yet because it still needs to be approved, but the title looks real. Cover page looks really cool. A lot of this stuff we're talking about will be included in that book. It's also stuff that we talked about last semester, as you know, in our historical methods class that I was teaching. Sloan was a member of that class, and we were talking about these kinds of issues of how our faith informs what we do as historians. This time we want to talk about the sort of opposite of the Imago Dei, right? All human beings are created in the image of God. They have dignity, they have worth. But we are also flawed human beings, or what the Christian tradition calls sinful human beings. All of us are born into sin, and all of us are prone to sin. And as a result, that Christian teaching, that Christian doctrine, the doctrine of human sin, also may have a profound effect for Christians on how we think about the past and how we think about the human experience. I love the quote from George Marsden, who wrote a great essay on this subject in a book called Figures in the Carpet, edited by Bill McClay. In that essay, he says that of all the Christian teachings, the doctrine of original sin or pervasive human depravity has the most empirical verification. The modern world seems to confirm it. And again, anyone who has studied the human experience, especially the modern human experience, especially the 20th century, can't deny the fact that human beings are in many ways flawed. Whether you want to call that sin or not, I guess that depends on your religious tradition or your understanding of human identity, but in the Christian tradition we call that sin. You can't understand Hitler, you can't understand Stalin, you can't understand war, you can't understand injustice and suffering without a robust understanding of human sin. And frankly, I don't think that this is something that's just limited to those in the Christian tradition who might call themselves Calvinists. Whenever you hear somebody talking about total depravity or human sin, it conjures up images of John Calvin or Jonathan Edwards or Puritans or someone from a Reformed or Calvinist tradition. In many ways, all of the Christian traditions, to some degree more than others, embrace the idea that human beings are flawed. Embrace the idea that human beings are sinful, and thus behave in ways that are more concerned with themselves than with the larger good, or with love for other people, or even in some cases love for God. So I think human sin causes us as historians to be a bit skeptical about utopian movements, or movements that promote unlimited progress, or that drink too deeply from the wells of the Enlightenment, or I should say modernity, right? The idea that progress is, human beings are going to get better and better and better until ultimately they're able to overcome all injustice, all problems. They're maybe even able to cheat death, to some extent, which is the ultimate, in the Christian tradition, the ultimate consequence of human sin. Now, again, that's not to say that Christians or any human being should not be fighting to make the world a better place, not trying to address these questions of injustice and suffering and evil in the world. We should all be, we're all called to do that, I think. But at the same time, also, when we do it, we must always come to the reality that, on this side of eternity, if you will, in this world, because of the nature of human beings, we are never going to quite get there despite all of our efforts. So I think it's important to keep that balance. I've learned a lot about this from Reinhold Niebuhr and his writings. Niebuhr always impresses me as a person who is very, very progressive, very, very interested in changing the world, but yet has a deep and abiding belief in human sin. It's that paradox in which we live, and that makes human beings very complex individuals. Someone like Thomas Jefferson, I think this is Jefferson, right? A guy who could promote liberty and freedom and all of these great ideas, but yet at the same time own slaves. This complexity of the human experience is connected to both the fact that we're created in the image of God and have dignity and worth, but at the same time are flawed. So that's something to think about. I think many of the founding fathers that you see here had a deep understanding of the limits of human life. I'm thinking of James Madison in Federalist Paper number 10, when he talked about factions and self-interest being inherent within the nature of human beings. Madison did not talk about this in theological language as human sin, but he talked about it certainly in a way that would be compatible with a Christian understanding of depravity or sin or the sin nature. So I like to rest on and always remember Augustine's words to us, that we're restless human beings because of our nature. Until we find our rest in thee or in you or in God is an important thing, I think, for Christians who are approaching the past to always remember. We're always going to be restless. Human beings are always going to be restless. We're always searching for something more because we don't live in a perfect world. I always tell my students that there are no heroes in the past. That doesn't mean people don't do heroic acts and occasionally rise above their character or their flaws and the flaws of society, but there are certainly by nature no heroes, because everybody is prone to wander, as the old hymn happens to mention. Everybody is prone to engage in behavior that on one hand may be good and uplifting, but on the other hand, in the next step, because they're flawed, they could be engaged in behavior that we would not necessarily approve of, or we would think would represent something that's not good or something that's bad. So what might it look like? Something to think about, a sort of takeaway here. What might it look like? What might our stories look like? The narratives we tell about the past look like if we took the idea of human sin seriously? As a presupposition, I'm not promoting the idea of sort of, talking about theological categories as we write history, but as a presupposition, I think the reality of human sin shapes the way we think about the human experience, both now and as we study it through time. So thanks for being with us for this office hours. More to come. Hopefully we'll get these things up on a weekly basis from here on out, probably through May. And again, we got some other good things planned, so stick with us, and thanks for watching.